when David Grusch's testimony came out, I was just like, wow, like this seems like a really, really credible witness saying really, really amazing things that should be worldwide news.
The following is my conversation with Roger Ver. Roger is a serial investor based in Japan. He made his money early on in e-commerce before moving into cryptocurrency. Roger was one of, if not the first to invest in Bitcoin, and is a serial investor in companies to make Bitcoin cryptocurrency even more accessible to everyday people. He was the founder and CEO of Bitcoin.com, for example. He was also so early in Bitcoin that he's often referred to as Bitcoin Jesus. And I know for a fact that he's into UFOs. In this conversation, we will discuss everything from David Grusch to the Mexican Congress, reverse engineering, Art Bell, Bitcoin, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and government transparency. Roger is a genuinely nice guy, and it was a real pleasure to talk to him. So, the following is my conversation with Roger Ver. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, no problem. I was enjoying your Instagram while I was waiting, so it's time well spent.
How was Jiu-Jitsu?
Always great, although I have this really big bruise,
Ouch.
as you can see at the right angle.
Yeah.
So that happens sometimes. You do jiu-jitsu as well, or just friends that do, or?
I did years ago, probably about 10 years ago, and then I had a shoulder injury and I've never really started again. But I'm waiting on an operation for my shoulder, and once that's fixed, then I'm gonna start again.
Pretty serious if you had need surgery for it. And you're into crypto early as well, or recently, or what's the story there?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I used many years ago. Used a platform. I think Plus 500 or one of those. Is
That
it?
sounds a little bit familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't think you actually buy the equities or the stock or whatever, but it's on the platform, and then you put money into it, and if it goes up, then they pay out, and if it goes down. And I remember Bitcoin had come up, and this was maybe 2013, something like that. I'd never heard of it, and a few little bits and pieces were mentioned. And so I bought some, but it wasn't actually Bitcoin. It was just through the platform, and
on the platform, yeah,
and it went down and down. I thought, I'm not gonna, I only put maybe £20, £30 into it, and I stopped. And then obviously many years later, I was like, yeah, that would have been nice. But what about yourself? I'm researching you. I mean, very, very early.
Yeah, early days. It's been 12 years, more than 12 years now. So time goes quickly. So yeah, I was the first person in the world to start investing in that ecosystem. And I was in e-commerce before that, and I knew all the problems with like people trying to pay with things with stolen credit cards. I knew Bitcoin would solve all those problems. So I got real excited, bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and then tried to invest in the businesses that would make it easier for normal people to use. So. And to be honest, I'm more excited to talk about UFOs, UAPs, and.
Okay, well let's jump into it then. What first piqued your interest in the UFO UAP subject?
So in the mid '90s, I started listening to a man named Art Bell on the radio in America. And for anybody that hasn't listened to him, go and find his old archives. Like even listening to them today, they still sound so relevant. Even though I listen to 20 or 30-year-old radio shows as I'm falling asleep today. From that guy, and just wow. At the time, a lot of the stuff they said sounded so crazy and out of this world, but now it's like, oh, they were onto something. And like one other non-UFO example of that, they had one guest in the, I don't know, late '90s saying the NSA is building data centers and they're going to spy on everybody and they're listening to everyone's phone calls. And at the time, everybody thought that this was crazy talk, but now, thanks to Edward Snowden and others, we know that guy was exactly right and he wasn't crazy at all. And the government was planning and actually spying on everybody. So, and the same is kind of seems to be coming true with the UFO UAP stuff now too. Like previously people viewed this as all some crazy wild nonsense stuff, but there's more and more evidence. You just have to have an open mind, and wow, like the evidence really seems to be coming. And now it seems like, okay, some UFOs have crashed and maybe there's some bodies and maybe they were reverse engineering the technology. Maybe that wasn't a lie after all. But the really crazy next step is there's all these people historically have been talking about like abductions. It sounded crazy at the time, but if aliens are here and their ships are going around, or time travelers from the future or other dimensions or wherever they're from, maybe they are abducting people and taking a look, just like, human scientists go and catch fish out of the sea and look at them. Maybe they're doing the same. Maybe it's not so crazy after all. So just keep an open mind, just like I had with cryptocurrency. Keep an open mind with that. Keep an open mind with and to be honest, I think government switching the name from UFO to UAP is just another disinformation campaign to keep people off the trail of paying attention. So I still prefer the name UFO myself.
Does it? Obviously, you're in Japan now, aren't you? Is that right?
When I texted you yesterday, I was in Japan. Earlier today, I flew to Korea, so I'm in
Okay.
South Korea at the moment.
Okay. So, do you normally live in Japan? Is that right? Or
Yeah, I float around the world quite a bit. So,
okay.
but yeah, Japan is one of the main home bases.
And what's the sort of general consensus over there? Is it in the media in Japan? Are people talking about it, or is it
No,
not so much a
no.
thing?
When David Grusch's testimony came out, I was just like, wow, like this seems like a really, really credible witness saying really, really amazing things that should be worldwide news. And I feel like in the English speaking countries, for the most part, it was worldwide news, even if it wasn't the front page, at least it rippled around the world. In Japan, nothing. In Korea, nothing. And it was really surprising to me that, and I was talking to some of my Japanese friends, did you hear about this? Like, no, we didn't hear anything. And I told them to, Google it. And there's like, no, there's nothing in the Japanese media about it at all. And maybe that's changed a little bit because that conversation was maybe like a month ago now, but there was nothing in Japan and nothing in Korea about it. And, I can't speak to, China or Thailand or other places, but it didn't seem to really permeate the non-English speaking world from what I'm aware of. Although the Spanish speakers really seem to have jumped on board in the last couple of days as well with the alien bodies in Mexico at that hearing. So
Yeah, that's wild stuff. We'll perhaps come on to that in a minute if that's okay. What can I ask? What do you think, from based on what you've seen and what you've heard? What do you think the UAP UFO represent? What are they?
I have no idea, but I don't think it's just a figment of people's imagination. There's something really happening, and we should investigate it and figure it out and go from there. And I think the worst thing that can possibly happen is for the media and governments to like dismiss it and just pretend like it's not real and to ignore it and mock it. That's the worst thing. We need to have open, inquisitive minds and try and figure out what this is all about and what's going on.
All right, well, let's jump into the Mexico thing. What were your thoughts when you saw some of the press coming out of Mexico and the bodies wheeled out on display?
And at first glance, they look kind of fakeish. But let's do some X-rays and investigate and keep an open mind. And maybe they're real, maybe they're fake. I really don't know, and would love to see additional evidence in regards to them. So, and
Yeah,
I think this seems to be an even bigger part of your life. Like I'm interested, but I'm also busy with my other career stuff. So like you've dived in even deeper. If people come across this on social media, what should they know about these little alien bodies out of Mexico from your own research?
well,
Because
yeah. I
I
mean,
want to know too.
yeah, it's fascinating. I think that the Mexican Congress, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of witnesses who are very credible, who gave evidence, and obviously Ryan Graves, the lieutenant from the U.S. Air Force, was given evidence as well, and he gave evidence in the original congressional hearing in the U.S. So lots of people said lots of things, but unfortunately, the bodies stole the show, and that was all that was sort of was publicized in mainstream media, certainly, and it kind of took away from it because I think that's the only part where they didn't have kind of sufficient data to say, look, this is what we've got, and we're sure of it, and they kind of. I feel like they were perhaps a bit early, so we actually don't know for sure. They've certainly done lots of tests, and there's some data that they've released that the public can go and have a look at, but you've got to really know what you're looking at in order to digest it and understand it. And I'll be honest, I can't. It's far too academic for me, and I think you've got to be a specialist in those fields to understand the sort of DNA sequencing and what have you. So for me, it's interesting, but I feel like they've not come to the point where they can say we are certain that this is what they are, and therefore it's potentially something that could take away from the momentum that we've got at the moment of disclosure and what have you, where we throw this thing in, which actually might just be something that sends people down a rabbit hole, which is kind of the wrong rabbit hole. But so I don't know. I'm the same. I'm open. I want to see the data.
And if I can ask you one more question there too, since you're someone who's able to put even more time into this than I can, what's a piece of news or a piece of information that you think the public hasn't really realized or noticed yet that you find extra fascinating or interesting, or you think that people will be really oohed and awed by finding out?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think probably the NDAA the act that's going through the House at the moment in the US that would essentially make private companies and anyone working on reverse engineering programs to come forward. It's like a kind of a disclosure act in simple terms to disclose all of this information. It's an interesting one because if you read the wording, it's very specific, non-human reverse engineering. I've never seen or heard of language like that, wording like that within legislation ever in history. So I think that's wild. And if that passes, I think it's being debated at the moment. Is my understanding, which is American politics are slightly different from over here in the UK. So I think if that passes, which it looks like it will, it's got a lot of bipartisan support. Something I would hope would come from that because it motivates people to do it because it's a law that they have to. But having said that,
I think knows? I recall there's even criminal penalties if for those that disobey, which is like that's a pretty strong thing.
Yeah.
Saying give us your extraterrestrial parts, or we're going to toss you in jail. Like, that's pretty wild. So.
But having said that, I mean the argument that the naysayers would say on the back of that, well, hang on, they've been running an illegal black project against or above, congressional oversight for all of these years. An extra piece of legislation isn't going to stop them. So there's that argument there as well. But I think this is really specific. It's in legislation, or will be if it's passed. So we'll see what comes of that. I don't think many people are talking about that because they're more interested in the videos and the testimony and the kind of more interesting stuff, and perhaps don't spend as much time looking through the wording of things that are going on in the background, things like legislation. So I think that's worth looking into and seeing what happens with that, in my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that.
Just ask another sort of general question. Do you think that there is appetite in the government, based on what you've seen, based on what you've kind of come across online perhaps, and from talking to anyone that you do about the subject, do you think there's any appetite to disclose this to the public? Do you think some people say that this is a slow drip feed of disclosure to kind of get the people who are far too unintelligent perhaps to accept all of this information straight away because their head would explode. So therefore they're drip feeding it to us so that by the end of it we've got the information? Or do you think that they're just being forced to say some of these things?
Yeah, my impression is that maybe there's some shadow government that's drip feeding it out there, but like the normal above board government that everybody's aware of, and senators and congressmen, they seem to be just as out of the loop as the general public for the most part, and they want to know the truth too, is what it seems like.
Yeah, that's the impression I get as well. Absolutely. Okay. I've taken up enough of your time. I've asked the questions I wanted to ask. I really appreciate your time. Have you got anything you wanted to sort of talk about, or you got any projects going on at the moment?
I think I just want to mention to everybody, keep an open mind. That's how civilization moves forward. When people keep an open mind and don't dismiss things, and they find a new way or better way to do something, or who knows what amazing technologies maybe we'll be able to figure out if we really do have some of these crafts. But keeping it secret and just having a small number of people being able to access it, that's retarding the progress of all of humankind. So we need to open this up so everybody's eyeballs can take a look and everybody can have a open discussion about this and figure out what to do next. But it'll be interesting if we're not the top of the food chain here anymore, which is kind of looking that way.
Yeah. It is. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and take care of yourself, and hope to speak to you again soon, Roger.
And keep up the great work on your channel there.
Thanks very much. Thank you.